case, outgun and outthink opposing counsel. I learned how to use old cases to resolve similar situations and how to convince a judge or jury that a client deserves similar or different treatment from the people described in the cases. It was a strange system to grasp, one that was the opposite of what I thought I'd signed up for. My class, the class of 1981, contained a literal overflow of overachieving type A personalities, only a third of which were women. I thought I would fit right in, as I always was at the top of my class, a member of my high school honors society, had excellent grades in my undergraduate work, and was accomplished in other extracurricular activities. Instead, I began one of the most difficult times of my life, where my insecurities, fears, and inadequacies rose to the top, like the foam on a perfect latte. I spent long days with my classmates, many of whom were aggressive, hard-driven, and focused on being the best and the brightest. I was a deer in the headlights. The boring and tedious Socratic method made no sense to me. I constantly lived in terror that law professors would call on me, resulting in humiliation in front of my peers. My professors were like those in the classic movie The Paper Chase, including one who convinced us if we did not know Latin, we would never make it to graduation. The professors required extensive preparation and expected everyone to be on at all times. I often thought about a criminal law class I'd had in my undergraduate studies when I actually understood and enjoyed the material, which was directly laid out to us by a brilliant professor. In law school, there was no enjoyment. The lawyers-to-be I was training with all seemed to be getting with the program of being sword fighters, while I just wanted to sit down and talk it out. Was this being a lawyer? Instead of training us to be like I'd seen my dad help clients, I was in a world that was encouraging us to be the polar opposite. As a result, I piled on an inordinate amount of stress and fear. Depression and anxiety became my constant companions. I persevered through the first year, receiving a low grade on my first written paper, which was shocking. I'd never received a low grade in my life, and I'd always been complimented for my creative writing. Legal writing was apparently the opposite of creating writing. Obviously, I had another skill to unlearn. I did have a small victory when I was on the oral argument finalists team and secured a coveted place on the Drake Moot Court team, yet my depression continued to worsen. During my second year, I started seeing a psychiatrist who told me to stay home when I didn't feel like going to class. For a time, I stayed home and skipped a majority of my classes, falling further behind, and I contemplated dropping out. When I found spurts of motivation, I searched for outlines in the student underground and did my best to make sense of the material. Law students seek out outlines like today's young adults share music. The message seemed to be that someone smarter than you had busted the code of what was being taught and put it in an understandable format. If you got your hands on the right material, you could hope their printed, straightforward wisdom would get you through. When I felt lost and discouraged, I confided my miseries to Terry, another classmate. Terry and I had gone to high school together, and he was always approachable. We shared the fact that his father was also a lawyer. We compared notes and learned we were both miserable and bemoaned our futures, wondering if it was all worth it. The second year was bumpy, but I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. During my time at Drake more than 30 years ago, clinical classes weren't offered, so I spent a lot of time at my dad's office learning real lawyering. It seemed that without his guidance, all I had was a lot of book knowledge and no practical experience. Toward the end of my second year, my friend Terry committed suicide. I heard the news that day when I got to school. I was numb and felt guilty, thinking maybe if I hadn't commiserated with him and had instead encouraged him, he might still be alive. More eerily, I had his wills and trusts outline in my bag. I called my dad and told him I'm dropping out of law school. He asked me to meet so we could talk it out. So law school was a bad experience for me. I was lonely, depressed, felt inadequate, and I thought, it must be me. But what's interesting, and what I found out, is it wasn't just me. Instead, it happens to most every person that goes to law school.